What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao, bringing you the news this Monday afternoon. Several of Taiwan's smaller parties and its civic groups rallied in front of the legislature to draw attention to an opposition KMT proposal that they fear could change the way Taiwan's top court works. Our reporter Tiffany Wong is following this story for us in Taipei. Tiffany, what is it about this amendment that has people so concerned?
Well, these changes to the judiciary could affect the way their process works, and they say that at present they only require a simple majority to pass judicial rulings, but the KMT wants to change that so that it requires 2/3 majority of the total 15 justices to issue a constitutional ruling. Now, in the case that there are not enough justices present or not enough justices in the 15 seats, opposition groups are warning that this could severely obstruct their judicial process. Now, Taiwan's Constitutional Court is set to let go of 7 justices at the end of this month. So this is a possibility that their process could be severely hindered in the coming months. Now, Taiwan's Constitutional Court rules on some top issues, including same-sex marriage, indigenous rights, as well as most recently, the death penalty. And earlier this morning, we saw several civil society organizations and smaller political parties come out to warn about what they think might happen if this amendment passes.
那如果未来一方面不审查人事同意权，一方面又提高门槛，并且把实质的现有总额变成是法定总额的情况之下，这等于是未来的所有的宪法法庭的释宪其实都没有办法进行，这完全是颠覆了民主国家民主法治的基础。
Now, supporters of the legislation say that by increasing the number of justices needed to pass any judgments, that could actually improve the democratic process of the judiciary. And they have a high chance of getting this amendment passed because the opposition KMT, which proposed this bill, often teams up with the Taiwan People's Party to pass legislation against the ruling Democratic Progressive Party.
So, Tiffany, why has judicial reform become such a contentious issue here in Taiwan?
Well, this is all part of wider reforms led by the KMT in the legislature this year. They've been trying to shift the balance of power in Taiwan's different branches. For example, earlier this year, they passed legislative reform amendments that gave the legislature more power over the executive branch. This caused widespread protests by, again, civil society organizations and smaller parties, and that is now going to be ruled by the Constitutional Court this Friday. So as you can see, it's still, the court is very much important in deciding how Taiwan's legislature works, and now it itself is at threat.
Thank you for that, Tiffany. That was Tiffany Wong reporting live at the legislature in Taipei. Taiwan's foreign minister says Taiwan will not agree to move its representative office out of South Africa's administrative capital, Pretoria. The comments come after South Africa demanded that Taiwan move its office to Johannesburg before the end of October. Some foreign experts say growing Chinese influence in the country may have led to this request. Foreign Minister Ling Jialong says South Africa cannot break the two sides' agreement, but if it does, Taiwan is planning countermeasures.
那我们希望双方面经过沟通可以有这个就是转圜的余地，但是我们也是做好最坏剧本。
Ling also said that Taiwan would not rule out asking South Africa to move its representative office out of Taipei. U.S. and Canadian warships passed through the Taiwan Strait on Sunday. The U.S. 7th Fleet said it was conducting a routine transit, and its passage demonstrates the U.S. and Canada's commitment to upholding freedom of navigation. Now, Beijing, which claims the waters as its own, it has denounced the move, saying that it threatened to disrupt the region's peace and stability. Taiwan's defense ministry has acknowledged the passage and says the situation in the area remains normal. Families of the victims of one of Taiwan's biggest train accidents say that the government is covering up what actually happened, with some even accusing officials of lying. The group is also accusing the government of not making safety a priority on the country's rail system. Chris Gorn is in Taipei with more.
It's been 6 years since one of Taiwan's deadliest train accidents killed 18 and injured more than 200 people in Yilan on the country's east coast. Victims' families have gathered here to mark the anniversary and to call for more accountability from the Taiwan Railways Administration, or TRA.
We think Taiwan government lied to everyone, and we need the TRA to say the truth to Taiwan people.
The main dispute comes down to the exact time of the derailment. The group says that the official government report does not match the video from the train and calls into question the main cause of the derailment. The only person to be held legally liable for the train derailment is the train's driver, who was sentenced to more than 4 years for criminal negligence. But this group says the driver has been unfairly scapegoated and are trying to help him with his case. While the 2018 train accident was one of the country's biggest, there have been several more since then. And despite government efforts to improve train safety, these families say the government still isn't doing enough. Joseph Wu and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Former President Tsai has returned from Europe on her first trip abroad since leaving office. Upon arriving back in Taipei, Tsai shared a post on Instagram saying Taiwan will always stand with Europe to combat authoritarianism. Her trip included stops in Prague, Paris, and Brussels, where she became the first former Taiwan president to visit the EU headquarters. U.S. media is reporting that Tsai will soon travel to the United States, but her office has not confirmed that trip. Indonesia's new president, Prabowo Subianto, has started his term with a diplomatic blitz. The former general wants a bigger role for his country on the world stage while trying to keep out of the U.S.-China rivalry. John Van Trieste reports.
From Singapore and South Korea, from China, Australia, and the UK, diplomats have descended on Jakarta to congratulate and get straight to business with Indonesia's new president on day one of his term. Since his landslide election in February, there have been questions about what an Indonesia under ex-General Prabowo Subianto will look like. Though he's pitched himself towards young people as a grandfatherly figure, he's never escaped accusations of human rights abuses while in the military. These include ordering the abduction of democracy activists in the late 1990s, the final years under former President Suharto, a strongman widely regarded as a dictator. The accusations were bad enough to get him discharged from service and denied U.S. and Australian visas. Analysts say at least part of the population is still unsure about him, despite his popularity and public support for democracy.
Karena orang kan banyak ragu sama Prabowo, karena kan dibesarkan oleh Pak Harto, dikenal sebagai orang yang mungkin punya masalah secara hak asasi manusia, tidak terlalu mendukung demokrasi dan sebagainya. Itu yang mungkin akan jadi pertanyaan. Selama ini Pak Prabowo sih bantah, tidak langsung. Misalnya ketika ditanya oleh, kalau nggak salah satu wartawan asing, Anda dianggap tidak anti demokrasi gitu. Terus Prabowo bilang, saya kan terpilih secara demokratis. Indonesia itu sudah demokrasi sejak kapan gitu. Jadi tapi kita nggak tahu ke depan. Itu saya kira isu-isunya.
But the international community is also looking to see what Prabowo will bring to the country. The diplomatic blitz that's come right after his inauguration Sunday is in line with his vision of an Indonesia with a bigger global presence, the world's fourth most populous nation come into its own. But in his inaugural address, he also repeated a pledge to keep Indonesia non-aligned.
Indonesia memilih jalan bebas aktif, non-blok, non-aligned. Kita tidak mau ikut fakta-fakta militer manapun. Kita memilih jalan bersahabat dengan semua negara.
It's what he calls a good neighbor policy, seeking investment from both the Western camp on one hand and China and Russia on the other. But some analysts see challenges ahead as close economic ties with China and growing security ties with the US and Australia create tension. On the streets of Jakarta, ordinary Indonesians, especially young people, are also thinking about what lies ahead for their country. Their feelings range from hope to uncertainty.
Kalau harapannya buat Presiden kita Prabowo dan Gibran Rakabuming Raka, semoga aja visi misi yang udah dibuat atau dirancang itu terlaksana dan mengutamakan kesejahteraan masyarakat. Dan karena aku juga mahasiswa jurnalistik, semoga aja Prabowo lebih terbuka lagi lah buat media-media.
Kalau saya pribadi sih senang atau tidak, saya tidak bisa didefinisikan ya Pak. Saya lebih ke apakah bisa mereka mewujudkan harapan dan janji yang mereka kasih ya. Karena ketakutan ke depan kan bagaimana lapangan kerja, bagaimana ekonomi Indonesia, itu yang perlu mereka selesaikan kan. Paling harapan saya sih mereka harus bisa mewujudkan itu ya. Karena kalau tidak kita harus menuntut lagi mulai dari tahun pertama ataupun tahun kedua. Karena kalau presiden atau wakil presiden cuma sekedar figur untuk apa gitu.
After 8 months of waiting, the Prabowo era is here. And from day one, the global community and everyday Indonesians are watching carefully to see what it may bring. Klein Wong and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Israel has ramped up its bombardment of Beirut and southern Lebanon in its latest offensive against Hezbollah. The Israeli army launched rockets across Lebanon on Sunday, saying it is targeting financial institutions that support the militant group. The strikes come after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Hezbollah of trying to assassinate him in a drone attack on his home on Saturday. Millions of Cubans are without power for a fourth straight day as the country works to restore electricity following multiple major grid failures. As Rosie Granger reports, the power crisis is expected to be worsened by the arrival of Hurricane Oscar.
Starting fires on the streets of Havana to illuminate the capital city as mass blackouts across Cuba enter their fourth day. The island's electric grid completely collapsed after the largest power plant shut down, plunging the entire population of 10 million into darkness. And as technicians rushed to restore it, it failed 3 more times. The blackout marks a new low point in a country where life has become increasingly difficult, with residents already suffering from shortages of food, fuel, water and medicine.
De llorar, de gritar sin saber qué voy a hacer, porque es que de verdad no sé lo que voy a hacer. Y me imagino que como yo, hay una pila de madres que no sepan qué van a hacer con sus hijos. Y con la situación es calor, es todo, es todo. Las moscas, es todo, los niños, el calor, el que tú no le puedes dar esto, no le puedes dar lo otro, la comida en el frío echándose a perder. No entiendo nada.
Muy fuerte, muy fuerte. Muy fuerte, esto está en decadencia y cada vez más apagones y más apagones. Imagínense usted, esto está ya a punto del colapso entero.
And as Cuban officials suspended all non-vital government services and shut down schools, outrage spilled out onto the streets. Residents holding rare protests in the communist country, chanting, "We want electricity." Rolling blackouts have been persistent in Cuba for years, but have worsened in recent months. Officials blame the problem on deteriorating power infrastructure, increased demand, and shortage of fuel imports, with deliveries from Russia, Mexico, and Venezuela reduced.
De todos estos factores que inciden, la falta de combustible es la que más está influyendo en ello. Para que tengamos una idea, llevamos los últimos 3 días con unas cifras que son las más altas que hemos tenido.
Cuban officials also blame US trade sanctions for ongoing difficulties acquiring fuel and spare parts to operate its oil-fired plants, and for the country's economic decline, a problem the US blames on long-term mismanagement of policy and resources. The government says it won't rest until electricity is restored, deploying 52,000 workers to attempt to bring back power. But their efforts are now hampered by the arrival of a hurricane, with winds of up to 120 kilometers per hour.
Con experiencia y con ejemplos concretos en el gas que trabaja con el gas acompañante de los pozos de petróleo. La experiencia que nosotros tenemos es que siempre que hay un evento meteorológico como este, la primera afectación siempre está.
Further damaging the already embattled power system and deepening the country's economic woes, leaving residents in fear of darker days ahead. Karma Xu and Rosie Greninger for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks again for joining us here on What's Up Taiwan. I'm Eric Gao. Take care and have a great week.